So most of you know that I have been a life coach for almost 30 years, and it's been an amazing experience. But what most of you don't know is that I started off my early life as a on the spectrum autistic kid who was highly empathic and intuitive, and I went through a pretty severe struggle growing up because I was surrounded by people who were reluctant to understand me. And I'm going to just say that nicely. Because basically I was very abused and I was very neglected and I was very misunderstood because I was very different. And at the same time, I was exhibiting characteristics of someone whose brain didn't seem to function like the average person's brain. And so I would say things, or I would point things out that people would think were inappropriate, or they would think was strange or weird. And then I became used to not being understood, so I would try to figure out ways to be understood, and that would kind of come off as being strange as well. So as I grew up and I became part of music, music came into my life, I deeply believe that the music helped my brain to create a neural net where I was able to connect to other parts of my brain that helped me gradually develop and mature to a point that I was able to converse with people and learn people's language so that I could speak to them emotionally. There's some terms that, as autism and on the spectrum autism is being brought up in the zeitgeist of society and how it can largely relate to ADHD symptoms. There's a lot of terms that are coming into our consciousness, and narcissistic personality disorder, avoidant personality disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder. And then the new one that I love is, it's where you're being stubborn. It's defiant, it's a defiance disorder. And basically what's happening with a lot of these disorders is autistic people who are on the spectrum are being triggered by something. And now their brain isn't firing as well as they want it to, and they don't feel like they're in control. So they will exhibit some of these traits to regain a sense of control over themselves. And a lot of times, you don't even know what you're doing. It's very subliminal. And then, of course, as people start to point it out to you and you then see yourself doing it, you may not understand why, but you understand you're doing it, but you don't understand what's driving you. And basically what it is that the brain is just not firing. It's those neurons are not connecting to the other neurons that they want to connect with in the brain. And so you may present some stubbornness. You may present some reluctance. I call it slippery fish syndrome. It's when someone who wants to be in a relationship with you may be exhibiting too much of a controlling aspect of themselves. And so rather than you allowing yourself to be over-controlled by them, no matter what they say or they do, or they try to nail things down with you, you will just constantly slip out of their hands like a fish on a fishing boat right back into the water. They want to put you in their bowl. And you will use narcissistic traits, you will use avoidant traits, you will use stubborn traits to try to demarcate your boundary. And that will make you, as an on the spectrum autistic person, feel better about things. One of the things that I would like for everyone to really understand, as people are just now beginning to wake up about autism and on the spectrum autism and ADHD, is that these can be triggered by events in our life that create PTSD. And if the PTSD is strong enough, it's going to affect the brain to where the brain is not going to cognitively function as neurotypical as people expect. So we will begin to present so-called disorders to try to manage ourselves. And this will often create disorder or dysfunction in our relationships. And for a very long time, we will walk around hurt and confused and not understanding why people are treating us certain ways or why we may be reacting in certain ways. And really what it is that the brain has gone through trauma and we're just looking for a break. And so autistic symptoms can come in and out of people's lives. I know for myself, when I went through COVID and long COVID, and this was right after the terrible death of my mother, I had a really terrible time with my family. I lost a lot of dear friends, family members, people that I had life coached for years to COVID or COVID-related symptoms or things that were just going on in the world. And it created a tremendous amount of PTSD in me. And as this PTSD just kept getting bigger and bigger, old autistic symptoms that I'd had as a kid, where I would stim, I used to be a spinner, and I used to, I tend to repeat things that I'm saying, or I may go into a slight stutter until I find my neurological flow. I have learned to pace myself with these things, but as the PTSD from the illness and the loss and sense of abandonment just hit me so hard, my autism that's always been on the spectrum with me just came back with a vengeance, on top of literally having neurological disorders from the long COVID. So I started to exhibit autistic signs, and it was just like a nightmare. And it wasn't until I started to realize that I was, dealing with severe PTSD, which, by the way, is what I usually help people deal with in life, as I also help them deal with their autisms, which, by the way, is largely connected to empathic intuitive ability, because it's part of the evolutionary process that's going through all this. I had to really start to deal with myself and how I thought I had conquered all of these things, but now they were just falling upon me all over again. And it was just it was extremely overwhelming. And so I've just been gradually working through and almost reevaluating and studying things that I've known about for years, but seeing them in a different light. And, just like evolution, it's brought me to a new level of myself where I'm just now really beginning to be able to communicate and consciously understand what's been going on. And I have a lot of theories and suspicions that some of the things that we're going through right now in our world, particularly politically and just people feeling so disfranchised and angry, it has a lot to do with trauma, and it has a lot to do with the emergence of autistic traits and people creating an oppositional personality issue so that they can feel in control of the fact that their brain is not functioning the way they know it should. And so they are practicing stubbornness. So you'll have conversations with people and they just, out of nowhere, they just seem very defiant and stubborn. And you're like, what is this about? Or you'll ask someone to do a favor for you, and you know that they understood, but they they did it in a way that it just went all wrong. And so ADHD symptoms creep up there, and it just seems like they don't care. But really what's happening is it's how their brain is learning how to process what they're doing in everyday life. And it seems like they don't care. People can defy you politically about certain things that look insane to you, but to them, it's their control mechanism. It's how they make themselves feel better, and they practice an oppositional syndrome where they're defiant, and that makes them feel stronger, more in power. And there are certain political individuals that are out in the open that help people, or it gives people something to focus on so that they can find a foundation to feel more stable, when actually it's just a bunch of dysfunction that's keeping them not only in their syndrome, but it's creating a chasm where they're falling deeper into it. Because as you keep creating conflict and chaos, you're going to create more PTSD. And then the brain will have to deal with that. And it's going to be a hard and difficult thing. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about this, and I'm going to try to speak a little bit more. But this is just a taste of where I'm wanting to go with a lot of my sessions right now. And when I do speak in public, I'm probably going to speak a lot more about this. And then just even in, speaking with my close associates, friends, family members, I'm probably going to talk to you a lot about disorders and autism and sudden triggers that create autistic episodes, so that you can get a sense of, or a grasp of, the reality that you're creating, and then decide where you want to go from there. Because life is about creation. It's about building your own path based on the knowledge that you have about reality and the power you have to be a co-creator with God to create your life. And that's what I'm all about, and helping people to achieve that, and especially myself.